Howdy, ladies and gentlemen of the Maroon Faithful. On Saturday, the Aggies of Texas A&M square off with the Tigers of Auburn in what, in my estimation, is the most intriguing matchup of the weekend. Now, on one hand, you have the Aggies who are trying to prove they are not a one and done team, a one trick pony. Get the big win and then tuck tail and run. Everyone remembers too vividly the big win versus LSU last year that was followed by three losses in the final four games. Then you have Auburn, who was scorned by the refs over the weekend. Just travesty there. Honest travesty. They robbed them of a 4-0 start, a ranked win, and what could have been the final notice to their state that this era is theirs, not Bama's. OU cut that short, and maybe Notre Dame isn't all they are cracked up to be. So what's the deal with each team? To illuminate that, I need to tell you a story about these teams. There are 3 chapters to this book, and the finish is dynamite. Chapter 1, stats, one that will reveal my model as well, so listen closely. It's how I get my baseline for my predictions, which I think have been decent so far. I'm always trying to improve. So let's start off with the stats. We'll go through those real quick just to give you a quick baseline, because I want to teach you about Auburn and then let our War Eagle folks that are joining us know about A&M. So Auburn defense start off with 35th total D, 5th best rush D, 91st best pass D. So already right there, you already see a bit of a narrative, right? So we're trying to figure out by using these what the strengths of our team is versus the weaknesses of their team. And they have a pretty good rush D at this point. I'll get to the numbers in a second versus OU, but it was salty. It was really salty. But the pass D has something to be desired, and A&M is pretty solid in the passing game right now. We will get into that more. But to get to more of these stats, if the defense has one redeeming quality, it's that they've got 12 sacks. Okay, and remember that number. We are going to come back to it because it's key. 12 sacks, and they are top 10 in tackles for loss. So they're generating a lot of negative plays. That helps them in their drive counting. So what I'm going to start looking at here a little bit closer is what's happening possession by possession. We're 4 games into this thing, so I want to start getting an idea about how efficient a team is, what they're doing on a drive-by-drive situation, and how that's resulting in points. Okay, so jumping over to offense, 78th in total offense. They had a 42nd best rushing attack and 104th in passing. Some clear weaknesses right there as well. Some that may match up with us pretty good. We're still trying to figure out what our identity is maybe on defense. If we're a pass rush team, if we're a run stopping team, we're not a run stopping team so far. I'm just tossing it out there. Can we cover well? That probably is the largest candidate, the best candidate for this team right now is whether or not we are a lockdown team. We've got Des Ricks on one side, Will Lee on the other, Ratcliffe, and hopefully Bryce Anderson returning, not this week, I don't think, but from his head injury, hopefully soon. I've been praying for that guy. But it looks like that matchup might work out good for A&M in our favor as well. Something to note, they are 102nd in penalties overall. So it's not just offensive penalties, not just defensive penalties. They're doing 7 penalties per game for 63 yards to the opponent. And you got to think, if you just split those right down the middle, half for offense, half for defense, in a game, if you are getting somewhere in the neighborhood of about 12 possessions, that's about an average game for most teams. Every so often, you'll have 13 possessions, and maybe it's a little bit stingier game, you're 10 or 11. Those are pretty random, to be quite honest. 12 is pretty much the sweet spot. Then with 63 yards of penalties on either side of the ball, you're talking about drive stoppers, right? So 12 drives. If you have 3 penalties of holding on offense, you're setting yourself back and probably stopping 3 plays. So you just went from 12 potential drives down to 9 right off the bat. From that 9, how many of those can you turn into scoring drives? You still got to figure in some of those you go 3 and out. Some of those are longer drives and you still stall out and you just can't quite make the 75 or 80-yard trek down the field. So the penalties are a big deal. Same thing for tackles for loss. And on the flip side, if you're giving penalties away to the offense, when you're on defense, then you're extending their drive. You're making their work easier. You may be playing field position and you've got them backed up. 10-yard holding penalty on the defense or legal hands to the face or whatever it may be, face mask, pass interference, and you get them out of their own red zone and you've just given them life. So these are quite a big deal, and they've played quite a large role in Auburn's game so far, particularly against OU. So that rolls right into flip the page, chapter 2, the state of the team. And here's where the conversation starts, in my opinion. Who have these teams played and what have they done? So at this point, we're in week 4. Auburn's played 4 teams, A&M's played 3. We've had the bye. I think they have theirs right after this. The question becomes, the teams that you've played, who are they? Are they as good as they seem to be, or are they not as good as they seem to be? Because a lot of what you want to predict is based off of, has that team performed the way that they want? Notre Dame's a great example of this, right? So going to the college football playoff last year, doing as well as they did, coming into this year with quite a bit of hype. The idea is that they are just as good as they were last year. But if you really want to boil that down, you think about that. That's a tall task. I mean, how many teams are really from year in, year out, going to actually repeat that kind of circumstance, that kind of situation, get that same kind of result? The level at which you have to play to do that is difficult. To pull that out of your team and have them play at this level, week in, week out, year to year, is really, really much more difficult thing to do than what it looks like it should be able to be done on paper. So let's talk about what they did versus OU. All right, we'll start there and then we'll slide on over to Notre Dame. Okay, so OU, it's a pretty good team so far from what people are saying. On offense, they did 287 yards offense. 220 of that was through the air. Just 67 of that on the ground. Now that's a 1.9 yard per rush average. Like I was telling you before, that is salty. That's way salty. That is probably one of the best marks in the country on a game, especially when you've got 2 juggernauts like that, name brands. And I would argue Auburn probably should be ranked at this point. They're not, but that, in a ranked matchup, man, that's a number. 1.9 yards per rush. Now Arnold for Auburn was 21 of 33. So he did 63%, but he was sacked 10 times. Okay, so thinking about how Auburn's offense then went after Oklahoma's defense. Like I said, Arnold, 21 of 33, 63%, and 10 sacks. We talked about the negative plays earlier. So Auburn is giving up 10 sacks. Now, these sacks range from probably 3 yards to 10 yards. They're essentially as good as a false start. False start's not a complete drive killer, and neither is a holding penalty. However, the difficulty that is added to that drive once that sort of thing takes place, especially anything over 5 yards, you've got to understand that just is a monstrous thing to overcome, especially 10 times. You got to overcome 10 sacks. So is that part of the identity of their team? On top of that, they gave 13 penalties and gave up 85 yards. That is just incredible at this point. So that's just in this game. Remember, they were averaging somewhere around like 63 yards for penalties. That's where they currently are when it comes to the penalty stat. But in this game, 85 yards, 13 penalties, 13 times they helped Oklahoma. So let's think about this from a production standpoint, okay? Auburn got 61 yards from Cobb. Okay, they did that with 6 carries. 88 yards from Cam Coleman. This is their big, high-profile like 5-star receiver. Okay, they did that with 3 catches, 88 yards for Cam Coleman on 3 catches, 60 yards from Singleton, and this all basically adds up to 209 yards. 209 yards. Remember, they had 287 yards. 287 yards. And 209 of these are coming just from these 3 folks. Okay? So you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of what? Just over 2/3. So right around 70% of their offense is coming from these 3 individuals. Okay, just from production. So 70% of the production for Auburn comes from 3 guys. Okay, that doesn't include Jackson Arnold, right? And he's going to touch the ball every single time. He's going to run some, he's going to throw, he's going to distribute all that. So I'm not even counting that. But these 3 guys, 70% of the offense. Okay, 209 yards from these 3 guys. Now, functionally, Auburn has 68 plays. 68 plays in the entire game. Those come from Arnold. He had 20 carries. This includes the sacks. Okay, so design runs, all that, 20. Singleton had 9. Alston, the running back 2, had 7 carries. Coleman, like I said, 3 catches. Cobb, 6 more carries for him, and then they had 6 punts and 2 field goals. So I'm going to take the 6 punts and field goals out. That's not going to be part of their actual functional production. Okay, so you're left with about 60 plays. 60 plays, and if you put all that together, you get about 45 plays from Arnold, Singleton, Coleman, Alston, and Cobb. Okay, you're looking at again somewhere in the 70, maybe just north of 70% coming from these guys. Okay, so when you're going on a possession by possession situation and you're scheming, and you're going to have to know what kind of game these guys are playing, how they're moving the ball with these. Cam Coleman's a great example. Cam Coleman, 3 catches, like I said, 88 yards. 2 of the 3 catches were massive, massive catches. Well, actually all 3 of them, because one of them was a touchdown. But the other 2 were big time, over the top, pretty much one-on-one, high point in the ball kind of situations for Cam Coleman. Now that's going to prove to be a challenge for A&M. We have 2 good cover corners, but can they be big enough? Can they be physical enough? I'll take you back to the Notre Dame game real quick. There was a play. Will Lee was being pretty physical with Malachi Fields. Gave him a good push. He stayed on him. And then Malachi gets thrown the ball from C.J. Carr. It's a nice, pretty high point ball, put in really good spot, to be honest. And he comes down with it. It's a good big receiver. I mean, he's going to come down with some of them. And they're going to try and do that a lot with Coleman. They're going to try and get him in those one-on-one situations as much as they possibly can. I'll tell you how you played him to limit him to just 3 catches. That'll be kind of key about maybe what we might want to try and do with it. So let me kind of illuminate just a little bit more because I'm getting into my model about making some baseline predictions. Okay, so for Auburn, like I said, about 70% of their offense is coming from these guys. They had 12 possessions, okay, right there in the sweet spot. They had 5 3-and-outs, 5 drives with less than 10 plays, and one of those, only one, was a scoring drive. They had 2 drives with 10 or more plays, and those earned them 10 points. So they didn't convert both into touchdowns. One was a touchdown, one was a field goal. And you can kind of see the profile of how they are scoring when they score. They're giving up a fair amount of 3-and-outs. They're not been able to run the ball. That has something to do with it. They're not really able to get Cam Coleman in the game as much as they'd like. All this leading up to a fair amount of 3-and-outs. So this is speaking to their efficiency and their points production. So again, what this boils down to is if you take each drive for them, if they are in this game earning, I think it was what was it, 17 points, somewhere right in that range. Each drive for them is worth about 1.4 points per possession. So if you boil down their points, you said, okay, you have these amount of points, and you had this many possessions, just divide that straight up and you get 1.4. Okay? I would like to double check my numbers real quick because it never ever really hurts to, make sure your numbers are all working out. But think about that from a per possession standpoint, right? And I'm going to use that to then project what their potential or probable possession points gain would be coming into this game, right? So I'll work the numbers just one more time. Make sure we worked out just right. 17 points divided by 12 possessions. 1.4 on the nose, y'all. So they're doing 1.4 points per possession. Now, A&M versus Notre Dame, we scored 40 points. We did this on 13 possessions, and that works out to 3.1 points per possession for us. So that's what our offense did, right? And I'm sorry, flip that around. I went backwards on that. We allowed that from Notre Dame. So that's their defense. So we allowed 3.1 points per possession from our opponent. So just real quick, I'm not trying to get too fancy with it, but the truth is usually somewhere right in the middle of that. So if they're doing 1.4 on offense and we're allowing offenses to do 3.1, well, reason says that they're probably going to do somewhere north of what they've done and somewhere south of what we've allowed between the two, right? So 1.4, 3.1, you're looking at what, 4.5 there. So an average of 2.25 points per possession, okay? 2.25 points per possession. And how many possessions are in a game? 12. So what's this put them at? Probably somewhere right around the 27-point range, okay? Okay, all right. So we're expecting to start off with reasoning this out with Auburn scoring 27 points. Great. All right, let's move on to defense. Okay, their defense. Mateer for OU, he was 24 of 36 passing, pretty good numbers. He did 271 yards. They only added 35 more on the ground. So Auburn's defense was allowing OU to do 1.5 yards per carry. That's also a salty number. So they did better than OU's number. They did actually 0.4 better, 0.4 yards better. So if the other one was really good, 1.5, amazing. So a couple things to note here when it comes to the defense and when it comes to the points that were scored, because when you look at their points allowed, you tag that to the defense. All right. So there has to be a little bit of a conversation there, right? They had a bad snap, backed them up, gave OU a short field. OU scores. Okay. So how much of that do you attribute to Auburn's defense? You got to make some concessions here, right? Then you have the hideout foul. I'm sorry, Auburn. I feel for you on this one as a team that's gotten many calls not go their way and only recently had one that's really gone in our favor. I feel for you on this hideout play. From everything we've been told, this should not have been what it was, but there's that play. If they don't get this play, does OU score? Probably not. They might have. There's no way to tell for sure, but probably not. So take all these things into consideration as we are figuring out what they would do on defense how many points they would allow per possession. Okay, so OU had 13 possessions. They were 24 points on 13 possessions. That's 1.85 points per possession that OU is getting. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say the last possession doesn't count. It was a garbage time, and I'm going to give them 12. 12 possessions. So that's going to work out to just slightly more than that. I think I actually already did the numbers on that. But we will double check them. So it's going to come out right at 2, right? Okay. So 24 points, 12 possessions, 2 points per possession is essentially what Auburn is allowing their opponents to do. Now, A&M on offense, we put up 41 points on Notre Dame. We did that on 13 possessions, right? So Notre Dame, 13 possessions, 41 points. That's 3.2 points per possession that we were doing. So taking the average, 2 points plus 3.2 points, you got 5.2 points, right? What's half of that? 2.55, right? 2.55. And then 12 possessions, that puts us somewhere in the range of 29 points. So just off of this kind of metrics, if we continue some of these trends up, A&M should score about 29 points. Auburn should score about 27 points, okay? And that's just the baseline. That's all it's meant to be, is a baseline. After looking at the stats and the storyline and everything else in our through this 2 chapters in, that's a decent place to start in reasoning about what these teams are going to do. So chapter 3 gets us into the tape. After watching the tape, here are my thoughts. Right? This is where you get into like X factors. This is where you get into things like intangibles. Stats just don't tell the entire story, right? They're kind of boring. You've got to like try and understand a team, who they are, what they're doing, and what they've been able to do, who they played against, to kind of understand what kind of production might they do versus their baseline. Okay? So chapter 3 is all about my thoughts looking at their most recent game. So early on, y'all, the sacks on Jackson Arnold were coverage sacks. I mentioned this before about this mismatch that could be potentially exploited. A lot of these were coverage sacks, which it was early on. It continued into the second quarter. It maybe went away a little bit more. It wasn't exactly obvious second half of the game, but OU really got after them, covered them well. They stayed on Cam Coleman, limited Singleton. He had 9 catches, just not as many yards. And so how did they do this? They had a strong secondary. They had a strong secondary. It went a long way to stifling Auburn for sure. And I'm going to talk about how they did that a little bit more, because they were also successful with Cam Coleman. Even though it was only 3 catches, he was still successful. And they were successful how? They got him one-on-one. So before we talk about how to, limit him, you got to know what situation they were getting him into for him to be successful. It was largely one-on-one situations. Most of the time they were backed up. They went max protect. They got him in one-on-one, made the defense think that they were probably going to just try and inch this thing out of the end zone because they were backed up inside the 5. They end up not doing that. They go max protect and they toss one up to him. And man, oh man, does he come down with 2 beauties. And that's how they were able to do that. That's on those 2 plays. Remember, the third one was a scoring play. I think it was only like a 2-yard play. Big time play they needed from the guy. But when it comes to yards and production, not really much in moving the ball down the field, right? And that's kind of why I look at some of the stuff the way I do as well. Because you've got to move the ball down the field to get yourself the points. Sometimes I like to look at this by first downs and how efficient you are at getting first downs, because that's what really moves the chain, moves you down the field, right? Now, how were they successful with Coleman? How did they limit him? Well, in the first half, OU played him with smaller but faster corners. They definitely played him with man coverage, and the sacks played a big deal. So it wasn't easy to get that much time. There were times when Arnold needed to get rid of the ball, and he just didn't. He was either not in the right read at the time, and it couldn't. It just worked out where it wasn't on Coleman, and he wasn't going to throw it up to him. But they were still successful on him, man. And these corners weren't large, but they were speedy. I think we can probably match some of that with Des Ricks and Will Lee, definitely to an extent. I don't know that they're the absolute speediest guys, but they, coverage wise, it seems like they, in any speed that they lack at the moment, they make up for in skill. Fair enough. Now, second half, they went ahead and played him a little bit more in a safe. They kind of got tired of the over the top stuff, and they didn't want to give up anything big, so did play him with a little bit more over the top safety in this game. So that's going to be dictated about how successful we are with him early on. If we're not giving up any large plays, we might stick with the man. If we are, probably going to look at moving us to safety over, doing something similar to OU. That, however, is going to come with a trade-off. And if we're going to move that safety over and give more to to Coleman, then we're probably going to give up something in support wise for the box, which is going to open up the running game for them a little bit more. So that little dynamic is going to be a very interesting one to see how successful we can be on Coleman and Singleton, limiting them while still continuing to play the run. They're definitely going to have this same kind of situation going on. We will get to that because they are going to have to try and contend with our wide receivers all night long. Meanwhile, trying to uphold that same stiff run defense that they had. But if they've got to give way to covering Craver, KC, maybe even Bussy, a tight end, and then still keep your eye on Marcel Reed, that's a lot to do. Okay. A lot of what I've been saying, especially against Notre Dame, was hey, we got weapons, weapons, weapons. And when you got so many weapons, it's hard to game plan, scheme, and spread your resources and have them exactly in the spot you need to have them in, right? Something else I noticed, communication. What I try and do in these podcasts is give you something that you are not going to get from most other podcasts. Okay. Why would you want to come watch this one? You're just going to hear the same old stuff regurgitated over and over and over again. So I do pride myself on trying to find some small things, small details that may or may not make the difference in the game or whatever, but just things to think about and consider. One of them is communication. We can talk about the talent all day long. We can talk about how good Marcel Reed is. We can talk about this. We can talk about that. Cam Coleman, Hugh Freeze, the Elko era, just all these big media talking points. The small things, in my opinion, are what win games in the first place. So that's why I look for them. I think it gives you a better idea of what we're up against too. Communication for Auburn, definitely something they're going to have to work on. Communication, what's the right word for it? I don't know. But you can tell it. It's like you can, one of those things, you know it when you see it. You know it when you see it. You don't probably think communication, but whenever I say these few things, you're going to be like, yep, that was it. That's what's going on. And it comes out in the sacks. It comes out in the penalties. You see the O-line busts. All these things are part of communication. They're happening because of communication. It happens on the other side, again, when you're in the wrong gap. You shade the wrong direction, you slant the wrong direction, all sorts of things like that. And that's why you get bust on the offensive side of things, or you get a sack. Your wide receiver and you are not in alignment, and so you're not sure exactly where to go with it, especially when you need a hot route, or you see pressure coming from here, and where are you going to go with it there? There's just something going on. There's something going on. The penalties are speaking to this, the sacks are speaking to this, and something communication-wise is not there. And I don't think this is one of those things that you get fixed in a week. I think this is one of those things when you have this, it sticks with you for a while. I think we're going to see a few more of these things. We may not see the same penalties, but it probably is going to play into either them being less efficient because they're having to be more deliberate because of the communication issues. You have to be more deliberate to get that communication through. Then you start to play slower. You're not playing as fast because you haven't internalized where you need to be and where you need to go. So you're not flying around the field at this point. So you look at some of the defenses like Miami. I forget who was talking about this. It might have been Kirk Herbstreit that I heard speaking on this about how they just fly all over the field. And the reason why they're able to do that is because they know where to be. They trust each other. Watching Auburn, I don't get the sense that they trust each other right now, at least to the extent that they know where each other is going to be. They're going to do their job the way they need to do their job. And if they're not doing that, you cannot play that fast. It's just bottom line. Okay. So anyways, there's something between him going on. You can't really put your finger on it, but you know it when you see it. Now, when do they run well? They run best when they pull their guards. They do this and they pull a wide receiver too. A lot of times what I've seen when they had success, although very limited, they pinch things in close together and then bump something out. Okay, so they want to get you in close and they want to flex some numbers on you. So they may give this a bit of a look where they bunch in and you don't necessarily get all your guys inside the box, and then they pull a guard and they overload on one side, and that's when they got their run success. So they're going to be a numbers team. Every team is a numbers team when it comes to numbers in the box. Even Cole Kubelik, mentioned this in his review over the week. When they had the numbers, they ran well. But again, this actually just reverses right back to what I was talking about with communication. There's some things going on there they're just not working out to get them in the position that they need to get into so that they can be successful in some of the things they're doing. So talking about being physical at the line of scrimmage all day long, but communicating and having all your guys aligned towards one goal for that particular play is huge. And they just don't have it at the moment. It doesn't seem like it anyways. Linebackers. Linebackers are good in their run fits from what I can tell, but in coverage, there's a lot to be desired. This is going to leave the middle of the field probably open. Hopefully, Craver and KC can just take wild advantage of this. I'd love to get Bussy involved too. But if I had to have my choices here, I mean, I'd love to see some seam work from Theo or Nyblack or Borschiger, any of these guys, just right up the seam of the field. We'll see what the matchup's going to look like on these guys when it comes to their linebackers. Just a little small wrinkle that I saw when watching the film. So switching it over just a little bit, they had some unassuming plays, I would say, but they were key to the close observer. OU had some really nice pockets. Okay, again, not a big deal, just a couple of little small things there. OU had some really nice pockets. They threw from these and they threw well from these. Now, that doesn't mesh with the idea that they are a 12th in the country in sacks. Auburn, right? Auburn. Remember, OU had the nice pockets, but Auburn is this like sack machine, right? They're like 12th in the country in sacks. So how does this work out, right? These are the small little things that just kind of throw up a red flag for me every so often. That those two things do not match up. So I had to look into that a bit closer. And it's because they had 4 sacks that they racked up against Baylor, 6 versus Ball State, and then they had 1 on South Alabama, and then only 1 on Oklahoma. So sure, they're ranked 12th, but if you were to filter through some of these things, and you can with certain services that are feeding stats, you can find that what they've done versus FBS or ranked opponents or conference opponents, obviously through 4 games, it's easy enough just to go look, versus OU, 1 sack. So were they holding up the same standard they had been feasting on against Ball, South Alabama, and Baylor? No, not even close. Can they return to that versus A&M? That's kind of the question, right? I would say on paper, I don't know. I mean, look, we're trying to now start figuring out, does A&M have a legit offense or not? What we did against Notre Dame actually what we're capable of doing? Okay, so this is where I've learned not to pump in the Kool-Aid and just say, oh yeah, for sure. You saw what we did against Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a college football playoff contender team, and they might be. I mean, the media's trying to spin it up, aren't they? If you haven't seen it, go look. They're trying to say if they win out, they will be in the conversation, if not into the playoff. Be that as it may, right before the game, they were saying, hey, they had to win this game. They had to win this game to continue to stay in the conversation. Okay, we still got more to talk about this, and we will. But if this team is legit, then we've got to decide whether or not Notre Dame is actually a good team or not a good team. I actually think they are a good team. But what I am going to say is this. I don't think they're quite as good as people are playing them up to be. I think they're an above average team. I don't think they're elite. It's hard to make some of that case. I think there are some supporting things. Look how they basically played 2 current top 10 teams, A&M and Miami. They played both of them to within 1 score. So that's got to be something. There's got to be something to be said for that. So maybe they are pretty good. Maybe they are pretty good. I tend to think that they're probably not quite elite and just at least a step below that. And that's kind of where I'm going to land so far on this when it comes to projecting out this. Looking over, though, quickly at how OU has done in considering some things for them. Okay, because this has been Auburn's opponent, right? If you just kind of look at some of the things that they've done, they've been pretty solid. This wasn't like just their only game, right? You look at Notre Dame, same thing when we're saying they played well against us. Are they going to get that every single time? That's a very loaded question. So this is where I'm going to kind of get into understanding what A&M has been up against. Okay, so War Eagle, if you're listening, if you learned anything, start listening now, and you'll learn some more. What I want to say now are two things. These are intangible things that I think are the reason why hopefully you are coming here to listen to listen to some of these things. So let me start off on both sides. First off with Auburn. That game last week was an extremely emotional game, right? You got Jackson Arnold transferring from Oklahoma, right? We covered this in the season preview. This was going to be kind of a big situation rolling into Auburn versus A&M because they were playing OU the week before, and now they have to recover from that game. Even if it was going to be a win, it was going to be a highly emotional game. And they've got to come into A&M, find a way to play at that same level again and go out and win. I mean, you got to understand the level at which they were playing, especially emotionally. Like, what was their motivation in that game? You think he didn't want to win that game, Jackson Arnold, against his old team? You bet you absolutely bet you. They wanted to win that game. That meant a lot. They weren't able to. They were hyped up for that game. Can they find that same intensity? Can they get that same edge back? For A&M, I'll tell it to you like this. The narrative before that was Notre Dame had to win that game. So did we get their best shot? Their best possible shot? I don't see any other way to say that than yes, we did. That was their best shot. So whatever you think about this team at this point, from all the stats, looking, talking about the film and how everything was played, now the context filtered into this helps to understand whether or not those teams can continue to keep playing like that. That was Notre Dame's best shot. They played us as hard as they could have possibly played us. Was it like an elite team? I think so. I think they played us like an elite team. On the average, are they an elite team? I don't think so. I think that shot was elite. I don't think teams can give those kinds of efforts every single week, week in and week out. Now, A&M's coming off the bye. Traditionally, we have a slow start coming off the bye. OU has just had a huge emotional letdown. They've got to find their edge and they've got to get back up for this game. Can they do it? Part of me thinks that the team that's going to have the leg up in this game is who can find their intensity first. Who can find their intensity, use it to get themselves some points and get on the board, and then they'll probably be off to the races. That might awaken the other team as well, but nonetheless, who can get that part back will be pretty big for me in this game. Okay? Now, I also want to say this. Somewhat embedded in this whole thing with A&M getting Notre Dame's best shot, that was the biggest game that we've played in quite some time. The implications on that game were large, especially, not just for Notre Dame, for us as well. We took their shot and we fired back. Okay? Think about how it is, and think about how you might get when you're in that kind of situation. You haven't really practiced or been able to, what's the word? When you're practicing, simulate. That's the word. You're trying to simulate having ice water in your veins because that's what you need to do in that type of game. We have just taken an IV of ice water by winning Notre Dame. So now do you think we can settle down a bit when playing in a big game? We have more confidence going into big games. I think that's something that's being overlooked with this A&M team. I think playing a little bit more comfortable is going to serve us better, especially Marcel Reed, who may not be trying to juice things so much down the field. He may still miss some of those plays, but I think our guys are going to be way more comfortable because they've now won this game. They've played in this game. The feeling is familiar. They're comfortable with that feeling and they've learned how to thrive in that feeling. Okay? You feel me? So that shouldn't go overlooked. It really, really should. So let's get into my prediction. If the model kind of gave us a baseline of 29-27 A&M, okay, considering all of these things, um, you know, taking into consideration who OU was, who Auburn was, what was at stake when they played, and the same thing for A&M, Notre Dame, jiving all these things together, I think I'm going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 31-24 A&M. It's going to be a highly, highly competitive game. We are at home. We've got more comfortability with these games. We've also got a lot more under our belt when it comes to stability between our offense and defense, although we have plenty of holes in our defense and things we needed to work on. If we can get our intensity back somewhat quick, we should come back fairly healthy, ready to go, a few things patched up. And I think just putting all that together, you think about when we were talking about, some things like the sacks being allowed. Or I'm sorry, Auburn being a sack machine. Yes, but on paper, we've got a really nice offensive line as well. And you've got a lot of those little things kind of just working their way all the way throughout this entire matchup. I think it's just going to be a little bit too much. Like I said, we get the game at home, obviously. I won't be in the stadium this time. I'll be tailgating. I'm looking forward to it. I haven't tailgated on the grounds in quite some time. That's my take. That's where I think we stand on this. As always, I'll give you a quick, raw reaction as soon as this thing's done. I hope we come out with a W, and if we do, we'll be 4-0. 4-0. Hasn't been done in a while. 4-0. And we will be off to the races. We will be. There's the next three teams are looking quite winnable, but make no mistake about this particular game. I don't want to lead you astray. They have some very high-end weapons. They're very talented. If they start clicking, it's going to be a dogfight. One that Auburn can absolutely come out and win. So it's going to be fun either way. I hope the Ags pull it out. We'll find out. Either way, we'll review it. We'll come back, regroup, and have us a time. Thanks for joining me. If that was something that was good for you, you know what I always ask for. Don't subscribe, but fix your algorithm however you got to fix it. Like, subscribe if that's your thing, but share, comment, do what you got to do to make sure the videos keep coming up for you. As always, thanks and gig 'em.